Greetings, this is BK, and I'm here to share with you the presentation on Kiwanis Youth Protection Training. This is a very crucial part of Kiwanis's activity, and you'll find is hopefully everything you need to know about youth protection during this presentation. And there will be a live question and answer period later. I would normally take questions during the presentation. So if you'll write down anything you have, I'd be happy to answer those questions. And secondly, this being the first time that we're doing the conference online, we will be able to put this training out to far more people than we would normally if holding just a single class. So I know this is important, and I would like to emphasize the way that I view this is this training is actually not youth protection, it's Kiwanian protection. And I want you to be thinking about what you have to do to protect Kiwanis, yourself, and your club. And if you'll do that, you'll protect our youth. So we're going to start with the Kiwanis Student and Youth Protection Goals, and we'll answer why this topic is important. Number one, our purpose is to protect, educate, and engage all Kiwanis members, both youth and adult. You need to remember that when we talk about Kiwanis, that a significant portion of our membership is actually youth, and it's all of our youth programs that we actually have. And we're going to protect our youth members from predators. We'll empower and educate adult members with best practices when working with youth. And that is what we're talking about today. And we'll provide youth with positive skills and development tools designed to inspire and engage our future leaders to be their best. This is new. We didn't used to train the youth with the type of training that you're receiving today. We actually have training now for the Kiwanians, the volunteers, the chaperones, and for our youth. And what we intend to be able to do is to develop positive youth. And you do that by developing the youth so that they have the following 5 characteristics. They need a connection. They need a feeling of safety, structure, belonging, and they need to have the ability to build positive bonds with people and social institutions. Many of our youth today are hooked to electronic devices, and they lack a lot of times the ability to carry on one-on-one conversations. And that's the opportunity that Kiwanis has in order for our volunteers to go out and work with our youth. Second, they're going to have confidence. It's a sense of self-worth and mastery, having a belief in one's capacity to succeed. We'll build their character so they can take responsibility, a sense of independence, individuality, connection to principles and values. We want to handle their competence. We want them to act effectively at school, in social situations, and at work. And lastly is contribution, that we want them to be able to actively participate in leadership in a variety of settings where they'll make a difference. We're going to cover now why youth protection matters. Kiwanis youth programs, as I said, youth make up a large portion of our Kiwanis family. And we actually serve 335,000 youth each year. Globally, 1 in 4 youth will suffer some type of abuse or maltreatment. Those are not Kiwanis youth, those are all youth. And that's per the World Health Organization. 85% of child abuse victims never report their abuse. And with our current situation and the kids not in school, the schools have actually been critical in the past to do a lot of that reporting. And they have an obligation to the teachers if they see a child that appears to have been bruised or injured. And as we are learning, the abuse is usually at the hands of a known acquaintance or family member and not strangers. More than 90% of the abusers are people the children know, love, and trust. So it is our position as Kiwanians to be the positive role model for these children. Globally, there's $7 trillion spent due to violence against children each year, or 8% of the global GDP. That is in treatment, psychological, in treatment for injuries, etc. And we need to put a stop to that. Number 4 is child abuse and treatment are now considered a critical public health crisis by the Center for Disease Control. All of this came about before this current pandemic. The total life economic burden is $124 billion in the US. If you're not aware, suicide is one of the top leading causes, and it's the second leading cause for children and adolescents in the US, and it's the second leading cause of death in the 15 to 29 age group globally. Every year, the US, approximately 1,100 college students in ages 18 to 24 commit suicide. And it's been reported that nearly 24,000 attempt suicide. So these are students actually enrolled in school that the school's reporting. What are the risk factors? Well, children have exposure to violence. They see it TV, they see it in movies, they have it experienced in games they play. They're impulsive, they have aggressive or disruptive behavior, they have access to firearms. When you read or hear about a child that shot someone, they'll say they picked up a loaded gun thinking that it was a toy, aimed it and pulled the trigger. They didn't do it intentionally. They did it because they thought it was a game. And probably the most significant for the children we deal with is bullying. And that's gotten national attention and worldwide attention. And we have to build the confidence of the kids we deal with. They also have feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, and also acute loss or rejection. What do all the abusers have in common? Access. We'll talk about that, but it's anytime you're one-on-one, anytime you are in a private area, the person that wants to abuse the child has a much greater potential than if they're out in the public, and that's this privacy issue. And then lastly, they control. They win the confidence of the child, and soon the child believes in them and do what the abuser wants. And you're probably wondering, and I don't have any details later than 2018, which is 2 years ago from Kiwanis International, but all of the verdicts on the child sexual abuse cases from 2013 to 2018, in which we are self-insured and our attorneys represented the allegations. There was 50 cases, and we have a win-loss ratio of 42 to 8. That ranged in payouts from 15,000 up to 60 million. Now the average payout is over 7 million, but that's because of that 60 million. Most of the payouts were much lower. The offenders in the cases that were, of the 50 cases, 30% were youth and 70% were adult. This chart is a combination of about 4 charts, and it is the risk factors we can look at on us dealing with children. In the first column is the factor itself. Then there are 3 columns that describe the risk from the lowest to medium to high. What our goal is to go through this as individual Kiwanians and as clubs and look at our activities that we're involved with children and determine which level of risk we have and try to move the risk from the high end down, or add elements that will make the risk not as high, such as a second Kiwanian present rather than only one. And you take each of these categories, some are underlined. Those underlines were from all the youth protection classes that we had, that the youth protection managers all agreed these are the most significant ones. And so you take, as an example, the first one's activity. If you hold it in a facility of public access, there's the lowest amount of risk. If you hold it in a private home, you've increased your risk. And if you do it in an isolated setting, such as a camp like Camp Kiwanis, where you can be just one-on-one by yourself, you're in a much higher risk. And that's where I'm saying you need to reevaluate what you're doing, how you're doing it. As far as our service leadership program, we are doing much better than we had in the past of ensuring 100% compliance. And the Southwest District is one of the leading districts, and we've improved. You can see the chart here. We have 8,852 clubs that are of youth. And of that, 8,830 are sponsored. There's only 22 clubs, and they can form a club without having a Kiwanis sponsor that are not. So we're trying to get every single youth club as a Kiwanis sponsor. We also need to have the Kiwanis advisor reporting. That's gone up tremendous. And then the Kiwanis advisor has to do the background check, and that's gone up. And to complete the mandated youth protection guideline training, that's their lowest, and that's what we're doing today, and that's the purpose. In the Southwest District, you can see our numbers are greater than the international numbers, with the exception of the first one of the sponsored clubs. There's a gentleman by the name of Dylan Culthurst, and he has spent his life talking about generations. And he wrote a book called Generation Everyone. And he was one of the principal presentations at the International Convention in Orlando. And he has worked at figuring out what drives individuals. And they're able to, and he's not the only one, there's others that have come up with exactly the same principles. And they're saying that there's different generations have different ideals. And this first chart shows you a graphic of the years across. And you range from the first, which is the silent, then the boomers, Generation X, the millennials, Generation Z, and our new generation is going to, they had to start over as Generation A. And what they discovered in this second chart, you can see that in the vertical columns that each generation has actually specific occurrences during their life that shape their entire life. And for example, the millennials, Generation Y, they had September 11th in their formative years. They had Columbine. They had social media kick in. They had video games, and they had to experience the Y2K. Generation Z is the generation we're going to mainly be dealing with, and that's the children that are 9 to 23 years old. And you can see there what the factors they had. We'll go into more detail here. These are people that were born from 1996 to 2010, and they are the most connected and the most disconnected youth generation ever. They are digital natives. They have never known a world without a device. They feel they must be on 24/7. They're connected nonstop, virtually and online. They disconnect to deeper relationships, and they're at the highest potential for the suicide, depression, and loneliness. I'd like to give you 2 examples of exactly what we're talking about here. I had tried to give out a birthday notice to the family and friends when it's their birthday, and I got tied up. It was late into the night, and I forgot my nephew's email birthday wishes. And I finally got it off to him at 2 in the morning, and I immediately got a response back saying, "That's okay. I'm looking forward to a full day. I had a great birthday, and this will be my first day of my next year." So here he is asleep, but he's able to quickly answer back to me on an email. Secondly, we were on the flight to Orlando to attend the international convention, and my wife and I were seated in the first row, and I had we were in the aisle seats, and I actually had a vacant seat between myself and the person in the window seat. And I thought to myself, great, I'm going to get to do this trip without anybody sitting next to me. And as they were beginning to shut the door, a hand came through, grabbed the door, opened it, and the young female got in and slipped right into that seat. It was open seating, so she could sit wherever she wanted. And she sat there and never said hi to me, anything. As soon as we took off, the first thing she did was take out her phone, and she was from Phoenix to Orlando, never stopped with her thumbs, and she was holding conversations with many people. I could see it through my peripheral that it wasn't just one person, it was many that she was dealing with. She felt that it was important for her to use all this time to communicate with others. And that's the generation we're dealing with. So let's talk now about overall on youth protection guidelines. Number one, advisors who work with youth in our youth clubs and programs must have an enhanced cleared background check. And those checks are good for 2 years. The word advisor is underlined. This does not apply to every Kiwanian. But as you see below that, a Kiwanis club can say, we want all of our members to have background checks. They may do that. There is no issue. And then the next item is that you can use foundation funding, your service account, to pay for those background checks. They're $25, and the person does it themselves, and I'll explain that shortly. All Kiwanis members who are working with youth must complete the youth protection guideline training, policies and procedures on an annual basis. That's what you're doing today. So you will be able to accomplish that. Now I'm going to go into an area that some clubs have more to do with than others, and that's transportation. If you're going to take a child in a car, then there must be at least 3 people. My hard, fast rule is there's got to be at least 2 adults, because if something happens to the children later and they're upset and they want to make an allegation of you, if you have 3 in the car and 2 are child, then those 2 can concoct the story. Now you have to defend yourself. Again, I stated in the beginning, I want this to be available for Kiwanians to protect themselves, to protect the youth. So I highly recommend that you have 2 adults. Second is the student is in the back seat, back row. It doesn't say here, but you should never have a 16-year plus student be doing the driving when you're doing this. And obviously, we will provide the driving. They must have approval from the parents or guardian, and they follow local school, local law policy. Now, obviously, there's an exception. If there's an emergency and you've got to get the child somewhere, you just do it. If you're a remote area and you're the only source to take a child, those are things you need to talk with your club and go in detail as to how do you reduce your liability, your risk factor. As the next category is the use of alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, other intoxicants, and those are absolutely prohibited at any Key Club event. Now, Kiwanians may reasonably consume alcohol at a Kiwanis event. Now, what is the difference? A Key Club event, we are visiting. At a Kiwanis event, the Key Club members are visiting. And for an example, you have a Kiwanis luncheon or banquet dinner where you're honoring Key Club recipients, then you have to remember that even though you can drink responsibly, you must be providing a positive role model. Medication. This is something that's also critical, and it's come up in the past. Possession of prescription or non-prescription medications for the child should only be allowed with written permission from the parent or guardian. Kiwanians never provide or offer any medication to students, nor do we actually administer and that includes aspirin. Now I'm going to cover the different types of events. The first one is a single day event without an overnight stay. The emphasis without. All Kiwanis advisors, club members, and non-members, that means our volunteers, register or participating in any service leadership program event must have a clear criminal background check. That is new. All Kiwanians must complete the Kiwanis International Annual Youth Protection Training. And remember, that first one is the advisor, club member or not. And we'll talk a little bit later about the advisor at the school. The last one is that all other adults, which are volunteers, participating in a single day event must follow Kiwanis International Youth Protection policies and procedures, a copy of which will be provided before the start of the event. And we are in the process of updating our single sheet that we can hand to them. Overnight events. Many clubs don't do this, but for those that do it, you must have chaperones. They must be 21 years or older. Each overnight Kiwanis-sponsored youth at the event must have a minimum of 1 chaperone for 10 students. So basically, if you have male students, you must have at least 1 male chaperone for every 10 students. If you have 12 students, that's 2 chaperones. If you have female students, then you have to have female chaperones, and it's the same ratio, 1 and 10. Anytime you increase the number of youth past 10, you have to add the next chaperone. And they are not to share the sleeping quarters unless it is their child or in a bunkhouse cabin setting. Otherwise, we do not have adults in the room with children at night. You can monitor them, but you're not be in there sleeping with them. All adults registered for or staying overnight at a service leadership program have these following that they must do. Have a clear enhanced criminal history background check. So that's a little different because now you're going to be spending time with this child specifically for an extended period. They have to complete Kiwanis International Youth Annual Youth Protection Training, and they must follow all applicable youth protection policies and procedures. The exception is parents or guardians of participating students who are not the chaperones. Then they can be at the event for 1 night only without a criminal history background. And they've just recently added that Action Club members are exempt from the criminal history background. However, the chaperone and caregivers working with them are not. This is a new policy, obviously meeting the new times. It's called Policy 434. It's guideline for student accommodations at the event. The first, there's 2 pages of this. The first one talks about the planning, and it says that you must make reasonable accommodations for every student participant. The second one talks about the overnight event and talking about gender identity and how we must assign the students. And then that subtopic talks about alternative sleeping arrangement and the facts of what we cannot do as far as letting something else occur without the student, parent, or legal guardian. Roommate disagreements have to be resolved. And I think the single biggest roommate disagreement that I've been made aware of has been snoring. And we actually had an event not too long ago where they thought they had a runaway child, and it turned out they just went outside and found a place to curl up and go to sleep because they couldn't take the snoring of another student in their room. All students must be allowed to access restroom facilities consistent with their self-determined gender identity. Event organizers should choose facilities that can adapt. If that's not available, then we should consider a different location. As I said, these are all brand new rules that have just come out. Volunteers have an obligation to maintain student privacy and not disclose the information that they may give us on sexual orientation, transgender, gender nonconforming identity, biological sex, religion, disability, medical condition, or personal information to anyone including other students, their parents, without the consent of the student. Again, this is new. This has not been discussed before. So now let's talk about the reporting guidelines. As a Kiwanian, you ought to be able to have the hairs on the back of your neck. You'll feel them when you see, hear about, or observe troubling behavior involving a youth at a Kiwanis event. If that happens, then we have something that is probably going to be unsafe for that young person, and you must, as a Kiwanian, take the following action. Contact the appropriate personnel on site. So if you're at a school, you're going to get a hold of somebody that's the school authority. If you're at an off-site event, then you'll get a hold of the person that's in charge of that off-site event. And then secondly, you'll provide notification to law enforcement personnel as appropriate. That does not mean that you call law enforcement on every issue that you have. If there is an actual criminal misconduct, then we need to involve law enforcement. But that is something you will coordinate with the site person that is in charge. If you become aware of it after the event, then you must contact the leader of the event and let them know you found out after the event. Second, you provide law enforcement as appropriate. And third, you make sure that all laws are followed. Below here, I've given the 3 states, and I've said, what is the phone number that you contact? What are the email addresses? And those are for reporting. Now, Kiwanis, you'll hear about in a minute, has a new helpline. Let's talk about social media communication and best practices. This is probably the area that we can get ourselves in more technical issues and more explaining than any other. And it's best to be very, very cautious when you're dealing. So first of all, let's talk positive. The best bet is to connect via a club page account and not on an individual youth member account. Number 2, never initiate a following or friendling like posts or pages of individual students. So what that says is, as a Kiwanian, you should not be on their individual pages and start liking and commenting about them, unless obviously it's your own family or something. Number 3 is treat all social posts and interactions as public facing. Anything on the internet is available to anyone. So if you do something on there, it can be captured, and you do not want to have something that later could be misunderstood. Number 4, never post pictures of youth that you have developed in Kiwanis on your personal social pages. That is one that we have to be real cautious on. And last is emails. Follow the, and this applies also to text, follow the rule of 3. You want to involve the parents and another adult, and make sure that it's not just the 2 of you sending something back and forth. And what that means is avoid all one-on-one emails and avoid one-on-one texts. What happened was Kiwanis realized that we could better ourselves if we got input from an outside organization. So between April and September of last year, we asked for assistance to review all of our youth programs. And an external audit was completed by Presidium, and they're a global leader in youth protection. And we asked them to do an external audit, report to us, and then set up a draft customized Kiwanis policy and procedure. So some of what you're seeing new today is because of Presidium's review of us. I found out after taking these classes that they were also responsible for redoing all of the YMCA's policies. Number 3 is review and revision of Kiwanis policies. We have, because of them, enhanced our background checks for chaperones. We have greater clarity on procedures and guidelines for adults working with youth. They're trying to give you examples of the situation that you'll come into with some guidance. The Kiwanis International Board of Directors approved all of these procedures and revised on January 2020 meeting. And the obvious big emphasis is training, training. The more you get refreshed on this, the better you will be able to handle yourself and improve your ability to work with youth and keep yourself from having any allegations. The new suite of online training videos and certifications from Presidium is mandatory for Service Leadership Program Club advisors, and there's a link that they get to go on. I'll explain that in a minute. So let's talk about the ABCs of what youth protection is. Some of this is repeated, but it's now listed together as individual topics. So the A is accessible training. So all Kiwanians who are working with youth must review the policies, and they're available at Kiwanis.org/youth protection. They're currently not available in Kiwanis Connect or Portal Buzz. Kiwanis clubs are still required to review youth protection policies and procedures annually. So that means at one of your club meetings, you need to go over this as your topic and review it. Again, repetitive reviewing is positive, and it will help all Kiwanians act in the best light to improve and enhance the image of Kiwanis, where we have no complaints. Presidium is online youth protection training. All of the Kiwanis Leadership Program advisors are required to complete it, and that's good for 2 years. There's access to over 6,000 district administrators, youth protection managers, risk advisors, and serviceship lead program advisors, and that all became available as of 2/20. The Presidium online classes include videos and modules that handle abuse risk management for volunteers, social media safety. It happened to me, duty to report. Each Kiwanis role has a different mix of training modules, and they range right now from 3 to 6 modules that you must complete, and you sign on. The district youth protection managers have access to all Presidium modules. What if a Kiwanis advisor that has contacted to Presidium did not email you with the login information? Here are the 3 areas that you can contact, and they will get you signed on. Now, for everybody else that are not advisors and work with youth, you can access the Presidium training. You sign on to the member portal, Kiwanis Connect, and you click on the word Kiwanis in the left column. This will bring up the categories, and the last one will be create Presidium account. And then once you create it, that link disappears, but that one will allow you to be able to access these programs. And it's, as I said before, it's already there for the advisors and youth protection managers. Chaperones for youth service leadership programs are required to complete chaperone training. That is new. Chaperones must follow all youth protection policies and procedures. Again, that is new, and we will have to provide that to them. Faculty advisors, now we're talking at the school or other entities, are not required to complete the training at this time. And to the subcategory of that, if the school background check is sufficient for advisors, they can do that for anything on the school premises, meetings, or events. And the advisor should be given a copy of our youth protection policy and adhere to whichever standards are more strict, whether it be the school's policy or Kiwanis. Background checks continued. They say that we must have review of the youth protection policies on an annual basis. All service leadership program advisors must have a Kiwanis enhanced cleared background check. Now, every session that we give for every youth protection manager, they receive questions. Well, I have a clearance from, I have a clearance that's higher than Kiwanis from. They do not count. You must do the background check from Safe Hiring Solutions, and it's a $25 charge. You will initiate that yourself, and you will be given the results, and it will, once you review it, it will go to Kiwanis. And I'm going to cover what's in that in just a minute. All chaperones, which are club members and volunteers, participating in a single off-school premises or overnight must have enhanced cleared background check. Again, the safety because we're overnight with youth.
Your code word to receive credit for this course is Kiwanis Protection. Once again, your code word to receive credit for this course is Kiwanis Protection.
Safe hiring solutions, do all the background searches for the US and Caribbean. Canadians, because we do have a lot of Canadian visitors, they have to do theirs through their local police and then submit to Kiwanis International. One of the new things that several of the districts are doing is that the governor, in their requirements to achieve recognition for the year as outstanding club, are requiring that the club be in full compliance to receive their recognition. So they've added one extra category. Here is how to get on to do your background check. You sign on to the portal, you hit the Kiwanis on the left, and it brings out background check. You will have to do a credit card, is the only way they allow it. It's a $25 fee. If your club has a club credit card, you can be given that number and use it, or you can get reimbursed. So that you're aware, there is no financial or credit check completed on members. Members use the link only to complete their own background check. If you try to forward your link to someone else, it will again check you for them. And disregard any driver's license information scan. That's for their organization use only. It has nothing to do with us. And if you're a non-US member, such as the Canadian, then they put in all nines for the Social Security number. The culture of care and the commitment of excellence are the C and the ABCs, and we're trying to integrate positive youth development. And the newest thing that we've done in the last year is we now have a youth protection helpline. The number is 1-866-607-7233, and that is monitored 24/7 by the trained professionals. They will advise immediately on what needs to happen, and they will also give the information to the youth protection team. And the Kiwanis board just approved a youth protection specialist as of January 2020. And so youth protection team monitors compliance and enforcement efforts. As of our phone international meeting that we held this last week, there were no significant major advisement to the helpline. Everything was pretty routine. Everything was reasonable questions. There was no significant liability experienced by anyone at this time. Continuing on mental health, they're trying to do as much with the youth as possible. And so they've teamed up with nonprofit Active Minds. They also have Lunch with a Leader. And several of these workshops have been instrumental in helping the youth go on their own and look at sources online to assist them. So in summation, Youth Protection Awareness Week is going to be October 5th through 9th. And here are what they would like us to do on the 5 days. And the actual seminars were changed from the end of the year to the beginning of the year just recently, because it made more sense to reevaluate and learn all this again and be a refresher as you start your Kiwanis year rather than at the end of your year. So you can see for yourself what's going to happen, and you'll get more information through email and advice. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. It's critical that we hear back. And is there a gap in youth protection policy that you see? Is there some vulnerability that you see? let me know that, and we can take care of it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to call me at home, and the number is there, 602-2000-123. You can email me. And like I said, we are going to attach a link to this PowerPoint, and you'll be able to download it for yourself. Thank you very much.